outcrop of the day today is this nice big exposure of Breccia. I came here because I could see that very nice looking pointy outcrop up the top of the hill there, and I thought perhaps it might be a hydrothermal Breccia pipe. Turns out that's not actually the case. That's a plug of basalt, and this is the tephra cone around the outside of it. So here we are on top of the cone, and this outcrop here is just massive basalt. It's even got a bit of that hexagonal columnar jointing that you sometimes get in massive basalts. And I've broken a piece off here, and it's completely fresh. It's got some feldspar and pyroxene phenocrysts in there, and they're glass clear, so it's completely unaltered. After that basalt blew out the cone and laid the breccia around it, this plug's come up the middle and solidified in place. So here's a bit more of a close-up view of that basaltic breccia. You can see fragments of the basalt there, and there's a piece of the granodiorite from the basement there, and in between all that matrix of the breccia is just fine-grained basaltic ash, none of which is altered. And in fact you can see some vague bedding in the breccia just above my head. So not so interesting from my point of view, but on the way here it turns out there's another breccia just over there which is a bit more interesting, and interesting relationship between the two. So let's go and have a look at that. So here's the other breccia here. Superficially it looks a bit similar. It's got dark grey fragments and matrix, and it's a little bit bedded, but when you look a bit closer, all of the fragments are fine-grained granodiorite, and they've all got strong propylitic and some argillic alteration. And that yellow-brown staining is actually weathering of pyrite that's in that alteration. You can see the basaltic breccia just above my head to the back there, and that's the unaltered one sitting on top of this. So here we are a little bit further away again. You can see that basaltic breccia in the shadows above me over here, and I'm sitting on the basement, which is a fine-grained microgranodiorite with moderate intensity propylitic alteration, chlorite epidote pyrite. And right beside me here is that other breccia, and it's actually a pebble dyke inside the basement rocks here. Its fragments are all parts of this microgranodiorite. Some of them are a little bit rounded because it's been streaming up that structure with a whole bunch of fluid, and as a result it's got very strong argillic alteration, clay pyrite mostly, and it's obviously hosted in a structure. At some later date, probably up a similar structure, that basalt's come up the structure and blasted out a cone and rained down breccia on top of it. Probably much younger because that erosion surface must have been right at surface at that time. The story here is that it's easy to get bogged down in the nomenclature of breccias, trying to characterize them on size distribution of fragments, angularity and all that kind of thing. But really the most useful thing to understand is the field relationships. This thing's in a structure, that thing has horizontal bedding, and the types of rock in the fragment, this thing has all basement fragments, that thing has mostly basalt fragments and some basement fragments, and the alteration. That thing is essentially unaltered, this has very strong clay pyrite alteration. Those relationships and the distribution of rock types in the fragments compared to the rock types surrounding are the things that will tell you what is the genesis of that breccia, and that's the important thing obviously. And the alteration on top of that will tell you whether or not it's had a fluid through it. And from my point of view, they're the important ones. Breccias that have fluids through them can be ore bodies, breccias that don't generally aren't.